Hey. Welcome one and all to another Mere Mortals. Oh, I was going to say themed episode. That's what we're up to now. I wanted to say conversation, but no.
Dang, it's a conversation. Well, it is a conversation in between each of us, but it is also a themed episode.
A themed one. And today's theme, injustice, people, injustice. So we're centering this based on the story, The Ones Who Walk Away from the Omelas. So I hope you've done your bloody homework like I told you to. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about believing, what's in right. I guess the process of it. So I think there's three sort of steps to it: the believing what's right, the justification, and then those who walk away. So the aftermath.
Well, I'm keen to hear where you lead us. I also want to be talking about individual versus society. Some key differences there. Coming of age and coming into society, and happiness and suffering.
Good.
A little bit of those. So something, very small, light.
As I was doing this,
lighthearted.
I was thinking, man, this could actually end up being like one of our most philosophical, because it gets into some deep places and whatnot. And I'll preface this by saying, like, I haven't put nearly enough effort into this for it to be truly philosophical.
Yeah, if you're looking for a Jordan Peterson-esque 2-hour conversation about justice and morality, and
I could pull it out of my pocket, but I just don't think it's happening today.
That's why we're mere mortals.
That's it. So I'm going to start off with a definition as usual. So most of the places sort of say it's something along the lines of it's a violation of the rights of others. That's usually one. And then there's also the quality relating to unfairness or undeserved outcomes. So yeah, what I got from that definition was it is a bit iffy, because there's all these questions. Okay, well, what are the rights of others? And there's big questions around that. And then it's, the quality relating to unfairness. Well, what's unfairness then? There's one of those ones where I feel like you could just keep defining the word fair and keep going down and down and down and down. Yeah, so it's more that, I guess, feeling you get when something just doesn't seem right.
Yes.
When it's just doesn't seem right. That's like the best I can do in terms of
I'd agree. It's a very subjective thing that you could view it. I think before we delve into it though, should we give a little summary of what is The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas?
That's a good idea. So I came across this first while listening to Sam Harris, and I can't remember if it was in his meditation thing, or it might have just been on like one of the intros to one of his podcasts.
It might have been a podcast, because I do recall.
You do remember
hearing
it?
it?
Yep. So essentially, it's a very short story. It's I should have actually gotten the word count. It was about roughly 4 A4 pages, I guess. So
I know that's because I listened to it recently, and it was 11 minutes of essentially audio translation. So whatever that works out to be.
I think I read it in about 10 minutes as well. So yeah,
it's short.
It's short, and it tells the story of the Omelas. And fun fact here, she got the name for this from seeing on in the back windshield mirror, so like through a mirror of her car. She was either driving or in a passenger. As she was passing through the town of Salem. So that's how she got Omelas.
Salem.
There you go. And it's a fictional story about I guess you'd call it a utopia in a sense. And then it gets dark really deep.
Really? Well, it doesn't get dark quickly. It gets dark at like the 3/4 mark. And then it's like, okay.
Well, that's what I mean. Like quickly, as in like it's all nice and stuff. So
true.
She's describing this wonderful place called, I'm not sure if the place is called Omelas or if the people are. I think the people are Omelas. Yeah. In either case, it's a utopia. So there's just happiness and joy everywhere. There's no strife. People aren't like hating each other. She talks a little bit about religions which don't, preach the bad stuff, and it's sort of only good. The people are kind to one another. There's no need for
nothing's bad happening.
Yeah.
Nothing's really. Yeah. I think the key way that I saw it was also the funny bit of it was. They said like they had orgies with no repercussions or something like that as well. So I was like, excellent. But no, it was basically joy in whatever you were doing. Like anything you were doing, it was just joy, all the joy that you could possibly imagine.
And it's not that they couldn't feel negative emotions. It's just they weren't really manifesting in a way in their interactions with one another. This is sort of how you'd imagine it. It's the ability to experience the best of the world while still having that capability of feeling the bad stuff, and it's just not really emphasized in that way. So there's no problems, there's no hopelessness. People aren't turning to drugs to fill the meaning in their life.
They could,
avoid this,
but they don't need to.
Yeah, exactly. So she goes all this and she's like, haha, now this does sound utopic, doesn't it? Well, then let me tell you one thing. And then goes into the story of the child in the basement. So it's a 9 or 10-year-old kid, this dark, dirty basement, just a random house in town. It's locked in there. It's basically ignorant. It doesn't know how to read or write. It's probably never had school. It's it can remember, the child can remember its mum and being in a nice place. And I don't even think it specifies whether it's a boy or girl. It's
nondescript. It just says child.
Yeah, and it's basically on the brink of death. And in the descriptions, it's malnutritioned. It gets like a tiny bit of gruel and water each day, festering in sores. Like it's in this scared of everything, scared of the people, but begs to be released and sort of thing. And so the Omelas, their whole perception of their town, there's a realization that the suffering of this one kid is necessary for their whole society to function. And everyone knows about it because when they're young adolescents, they go to see the child and they feel, they're disgusted by it. They feel that all these negative emotions by seeing the child, but they also recognize this is the price that is paid for the joy
for everybody,
the well-being of everyone else is that this one kid has to. And now this is just a fictional
story.
There's not meant to be any sort of rationality in terms of like logical, pragmatic, how would this society function?
How is that working? Like, why is it that this one child, can't you pull this child out of it? No, that doesn't want to work. This is the story.
And she does say, they could take the child out. It goes through their heads. And this is where it sort of gets into what I was talking about with justification. They justify, the child won't particularly be able to enjoy all the benefits of our society. It's dumb, it's ignorant, it's had so much trauma already. It's not going to be able to function as a normal, being in the society.
Plus, the whole of the society would lose the joy and the utopia of what it is.
And then the end of the sort of, I guess, essay talks about the ones who walk away. So these are the people who either immediately see the child and just never go home, or after many years of reflection and whatnot, they'll just walk out of town and they'll be unable. I suppose the meaning behind it is they're unable to justify their existence based on what's happening over here.
Correct.
So they're the ones who walk away. And it doesn't say where they're going to. It doesn't say if it's a better place or a worse place. They just walk away.
Yeah.
So that's the story.
That's good. I like that. Good little description
and
of it.
It's a hell of a story, man.
It's really good.
As far as a short work of fiction and writing and the prose, all of it, bang on, man. It's really, really good.
It was won the 1974 scientific prize for writing or something like that. So it was obviously
recognized in its time.
It was recognized in its time as well. So it's a very good piece.
Yeah.
So did you choose that particular one, and what do you want to talk about?
So I chose it just because it stuck out at me really. I thought it was fantastic. I actually thought Sam Harris had created it at first. I was like, damn, man, that's amazing.
Well done, Sam.
Truly, insightful piece of philosophy. But no. So it's a story by I think I mentioned in the last podcast, Erica Le Guin. And I think this was just one of those things that really jumped out at me and was, I don't know how to describe when I feel something contains a lot of wisdom. I guess I just get a feeling for it. And so that's why I wanted to choose it. And I mean, I didn't even have the theme of injustice on my mind. I just wanted to talk about the story, and then that, I guess, was the main takeaway I took away from it. Just
so should we begin at the end of that story and then take us away from there? So my question to you is, would you walk away?
Yeah.
Would you walk away?
No, I want to save that for the end.
Oh, you want to walk away? All right.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for the end of that one, so you can hear the answer to those.
So I think I want to starting with believing you are in the right. This is maybe the first piece of how an injustice occurs. So I was doing a bit of research on, why does injustice occur in the world? What are all its different forms? We tend to know it in the form of maybe kids even know it. They're in a room together, they'll do equal work, but the scientist will divvy up the jelly beans so that one kid gets more. The kids instinctively know this isn't right, and you can see it in their reactions and how they behave afterwards. It's not just like, oh yeah, that's okay.
Whatever. Yeah.
So
there's like an actual reaction to it.
It's a deeply ingrained thing, and I think I wanted to look at it from the perspective of the one committing the injustice. So we're just taking a random person or a random event here, and one of the things was guilt. How does guilt play a part in injustice? And so the Omelas really don't have no guilt, and so I'm wondering, is guilt a check to stop positivity in a sense? So you feel guilty about something, and that's a check on yourself to stop you just doing the positivity, whatever it is that you want to do. So how big a part does guilt play in injustice? And if someone's committing an injustice, is it more often the case that they feel guilty but they do it anyway, or they just have no guilt, like they just don't give a shit, sort of psychopathic levels?
And I don't know whether it's even the psychopathic levels of it. So in looking at the ones who walk away from Omelas, one of the big themes of it was utilitarianism, in the sense of, hey, what's best for the greater good, like for the greater peace, is better than the few who get punished for it, right? So I was kind of thinking, okay, so there would be guilt. So if there's going to be something that makes someone either walk away or not walk away, or what's happening, I'm sure the Omelas might feel guilt, just as any other human might be like, oh, I'm guilty that this child here is being punished, and then we're all getting this joy. But if you have that utilitarian look to it, then you might just be able to rationalize and say, well, 99.9% of the people are like experiencing super joy. And so in comparison to the 0.01%, which is this one individual who's being terrible, that weighs it up correctly. So I feel no guilt, because in my moral quandaries, if it's like beyond the balance, or even whatever percentage it is, then it fits as like it's benefiting the greater good. So that's all cool. Yeah. Whereas others might be like, anything that's unjust to one individual, that's enough for it to be like, okay, we should all be guilty about this. Yeah.
So I guess that just depends on, I suppose that seems to say that everyone probably feels some sort of guilt in that situation, and it's just their mindset going into it.
Do you reckon that everyone would feel guilt in that situation?
I think most people would feel some level of responsibility for it, especially so, it's made explicitly clear in all the interactions that Omelas have with their children and their joyous races, the banquets, the feasts, all of them, it doesn't really say explicitly how much and how often they think about it. How often can they remember that one experience from 10 years ago seeing this? But to me, it sort of implied they're regularly aware that this is all because of that pain of that one child. And so then that to me would say, okay, they probably are aware of some of their responsibility in that, even though it's a tiny piece. Some of their responsibility is in that child's suffering.
So, so this is probably a topic I wanted to talk to you about as well, because it formulated in my mind. I'm like, okay, I need to get this out in some blocks or something and talk it through. So that example, on the story is, you think about it and you go, oh, well, of course everyone should feel guilty. Like, of course everyone's going to have it on their mind. Why wouldn't you? Because if you get to see it, you get to experience it, you should. But two things called out to me is like, okay, one, I think not all of them, but I think a greater majority of people will just forget about it. Would they not feel guilty in the moment, but then go, life fantastic. You can stop worrying about it because it's just not in your view. You don't care. That then goes to the ones who walk away. I think those are the people where, for whatever purpose, for whatever needs, like their moral needs are not being met, in the sense of, I feel this is unjust. I'm breaching my own values. If I stay here, I need to walk away. But then I started thinking about it. Okay, what about in the real world? It's like, is something like this kind of existing? And I thought, I can't think of one explicit example where I can be like, oh, that's the exact example. But there is surely a lot of places where we are being very unjust to other areas of society, whether it's maybe Aboriginals, whether it might be disabled individuals that we're not, like, no one is supporting, or other places entirely, or even people, across the world who are just getting absolutely, like, shitted on the side and being like, nah, we don't care about you. And we are benefiting from that. Now, we're not getting the absolute highest of joys. Like, we still have problems of our own. But there are people out there who are maybe being unjustly treated, and we are benefiting out of that at some level. Low level, not to the extremes of probably the Omelas see.
Yeah.
And I go, well, what's the difference there? It's a difference that in the Omelas version, they're right at the extremes. It's either like pure joy or like pure suffering, and then they can really easily remember it. And like, we don't see that in normal human life because it's not at the extremes. It's like, it's a middle that we still experience suffering, and so we don't even care about the suffering or the true suffering and injustice that we see across the world. And I thought, okay, because I'm sure we would all do that.
Yeah, I would say that's a good theory. I would say it's probably more because it's clear cut. It's real easy to see. There's no downstream effects. It's not like, his suffering is, let's just put it in a different way. Like, his suffering is him running on a treadmill, and that treadmill is the thing that powers, their electricity, and their electricity is the thing that, operates this other sort of machine. And then, there's sort of downstream effects, so that you could say, it's so far removed that it's easy to just go like, oh, whatever, it's, so I would say it's more like the fact that they are real aware that everything that they have going on is just due to this one thing. It's like easy, clear cut, and it's their choice as well. It's not just, this one kid has cancer or something, and that him having cancer is the thing that makes the town. It's like their forceful keeping of the child in this state. So I would have said it's more just due to the directness of it rather than the extremity. Although the extremities do make it nice to really point out easily.
But I think you probably hit it there well, in terms of the more connected or interconnected you are to the actual suffering at the other extreme of whatever it is that's causing it to be like, oh, that's the unjustness. I think the normal human trait is you will be more guilty. You will be more conscious of the fact that there is injustice, or that whatever system there is in place isn't being just. But the more you are removed from those steps, so unlike the Omelas maybe in our world, that's where it's like, well, okay, well, it's 17 different levels before we see the benefit that we might get. So to us, it's so hard to trace back all the injustice that just we don't care about going and tracing it. And you could really, if you think about it, there probably is there, but no one bothers to go and do that. Maybe a very, very few amount. And that's why maybe in the story of Omelas, when people walk away from it, I had a little bit of a struggle going, how I would really, like, what would be my answer there in comparison to like just in that little space of the Omelas in the story, and say compared to real life.
Yeah. So that gets onto, I suppose, the justification part. So that's where I would say that they're either thinking or not thinking about it. So I would say there's probably all sorts of mix, and we're just assuming normal humans in the Omelas situation.
Yeah, we're not taking into account like people who are like psychotic or someone who's like really morally like pure or something like that. It's got to be like normal humans that I can imagine.
People who fuck up. People who do bad stuff and bad things happen and whatnot. So, I was thinking there'd probably be a mix of people who, how would they go about sort of justifying it? Because I feel that sort of just makes, what is justification? It's the internal process of creating justice. So you're justifying something that is in the world. So it's funny, like justification is justice. Like that's I like how words do things like that. So how would people do that? I think some would probably, as you mentioned, either forget or intentionally choose not to think about it, and that's just the pushing away of the guilt deeper down. And then I would say there'd be people who would how could they justify it? So let me see what I've written down here. So they just start to describe why the child would not get much good, for example. So there was only a little brief part in this, but that really jumped out at me was, they would there was the inklings of justification there. Oh, there's no real point of getting the child out because it's not going to be able to feel all the good. It's not going to do, et cetera, et cetera. So not even thinking of the negatives of what would happen to them. It's more, the child can't really do this, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
What was nice in this story was there was, the child was one of them. So it was easy to see how it's more morally wrong. Whereas, say the child was born with an extra limb, say the child was black of a different creed, say the child was gay, say, all of these things.
Any ways that you could kind of like ostracize it and separate it.
Those are ways where it's way easier to just go, oh, no, this is
different
a different thing, different person, animals can't feel pain. Who gives a shit?
You're saying the Omelas are xenophobic?
Oh, they could be. Oh, Juan, bring back the xenophobia. Nice, very nice. So here's a question for you. Have you ever committed an injustice onto other people, and then vice versa, had an injustice occur to you?
Interesting. I think we, as humans, we must all have done this at some point or another.
Yeah, so I'm talking more like clear cut. You were definitely in the wrong, or that.
I've got an injustice for sure. I've got many. Like I've got many. I once, the clear one that I can think about.
Against you, or you were doing it?
No, this was against me in injustice. So I was denied a hat trick playing soccer once upon a time, and I headbutted this ball, and I saw it with my own eyes go over the white line. Like I saw it.
Yeah.
But the goalie dived on top of the ball, and he was like, I was like, oh, it's a goal, and I was like, kind of walking away, and as he kind of like not stood up, but kind of like rolled over. He'd obviously pushed the ball down his body all the way down, and it was like, oh no, it's not over the line.
Yeah.
And I was like, bullshit, that's gone over the line. They didn't give me the goal. They didn't give me an injustice. That's probably the first one that comes to mind. That I haven't been just with people. I think there would have been lots in, and how would I tie it? I would tie it to trust as well in a business sense. So sometimes I have worked with people where, to some individuals, I would provide, let's say, more care and support in the sense of, look, if you don't understand it, I'll walk you through it. I'll spend 30 minutes of my time. Let's figure it out, because I trust and understand this person's actually trying to improve. Where on the opposite side, there's someone very recently who I've given them that a couple of times, and they're just like essentially taking the mickey out of it and just not doing anything with it. To now I'm treating them very differently. So if something is, I'm just saying, hey, this is my expectation, give it to me then. If you don't come and ask or anything, then that's going to be on you, and you're going to have a harsh time for it. So if I step back and look at it from a different perspective, I'm like, okay, well, I'm being unjust there. But individually, I think it's because of a lack of trust or a lack of care in that perspective with that individual.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'd probably say that.
Yeah. So for me, the times when I've been unjust, I would say, I think I've talked about this before, but just relationships, and especially trying to bend the truth or reality to get what I want, and not particularly care about what the other person wanted, or at least, I'd maybe care, but it would just be at the sort of, ratio of 95% my own wants. So there's getting into like greed and self-interest, and only 5% of what they care about. So those are the times where I've, just in particularly sexual relationships, just not being super clear, not being forthright with what I wanted, what I saw for the future. Yep. I'd say those are probably the times where I've, hurt other people the most. For sure. Injustices committed against me particularly. Look, man, I can't think of any that are just, super blatant. I guess like mild childhood bullying or something like that. But
being drugged in Mexico.
That's
an injustice.
That's up there.
That's just life.
I sort of feel we're asking for it.
That's true. We were 3 Australians drinking as hard as we could at a bar. What are you expecting?
Yeah. So I do remember one time in Colombia, actually, in Cartagena, where I was just walking down the street, and I was getting, I suppose this would be like a more society one, where I was definitely getting singled out for being a gringo. So, people would get angry at me when they would come up for asking for limosnas and asking for, begging for stuff. And then, I can't give money to everyone. And there was like a dude, this one guy in particular, he was riding on one of the sort of like chariot horses that they have roving around the city. So it's sort of like imagine a taxi, but it's
a horse pulling a
horse-drawn carriage sort of thing. And he was up there with the conductor, and then he's like shouting at me from the top, asking for money.
Yeah.
And I'm just going like, absolutely not. And then he starts shouting at me for being like a greedy gringo and all this other crap. I'm just going like,
why are you such a greedy gringo? Greedy gringo,
He's the one on a bloody like horse-drawn carriage, man.
Yeah, you're the one walking.
I should have been asking him, yeah. So that was like a society one where it was definitely like,
gotcha.
Singled out for being white and rich. And yeah, that was definitely an unpleasant feeling. But yeah, I can't say I've had an injustice
heavily served you.
Heavy one.
Here's the interesting one though. So going back to the utilitarian view, right? So I struggle to see how most sensical humans wouldn't have some form of utilitarian view. Not everything, but some things. And by that I mean, the classic example is someone's about to get run over in a train track. The train going at them. 5 people are going to get killed in a train track. Train's coming at them, and then you get the choice to shift the train and go and kill one person instead of 5 people, right? And so the utilitarian view there is the greater good there is for you to go and kill that person as opposed to the 5 people.
Yep.
Now, just take away the whole, emotional feeling that you would be making a conscious choice of killing someone else and all that. Let's just remove that. The utilitarian choice is like 5 is greater. Like saving 5 lives is better than saving 1 life. And you can start getting into the whole, well, what if those 5 people are, criminals? But what if the one is your mum? And all this sort of stuff. So all these levels. But at the base level, it's 5 is better than 1, right? As like just a human to human, kind of like, what's the name? Bjorn-Lomborg style of calculations about...
it's like super rational, super...
so that's like looking at a super rational view, when I look at the story of the ones who walk away from Omelas, it makes sense in a very, very rational view. And it goes, okay, well, sure, one person is suffering while every single other human is experiencing massive amounts of joy. If you take away that one person suffering and make everyone suffer maybe to whatever degree, but there's no longer as much joy in the world, then you've basically gone backwards in the calculation, in that utilitarian view. So I could imagine some people being super rational and go, well, no, it makes sense. Like you'd have to do it in that manner. But that's taking into account that all humans are super rational, which we're not, which we're definitely 100% not. We're very, very emotional creatures. And I think that's the introduction where you go, okay, well, everything is fair in a logical sense until you add the layer of emotions, and specifically being introduced to the human in question that's, essentially creating all this joy, that I think would lead some people to go, ooh, okay, no, I can't rationalize that to that point. And everyone else would say rationalize it to that point.
And it just depends, because you can use different metrics as well. So the rationalization can be along different lines. So in terms of, should we help out disabled people in terms of an economic output? Absolutely not. We should let them all, starve to death. We'll kill them ourselves, because in terms of the economy and the work production and all that sort of stuff, they ain't doing shit. But if you looked at it in terms of a feeling of well-being, well, they can experience well-being just as much as us. So maybe we do need to, shave off some of our own well-being so that they can have a, tremendous amount of well-being. So there's different metrics for doing it, for sure.
Actually, you remind me of another example is in a more business context. So a lot of the software development stuff that we do, and this happens like basically any software development app, anything you want to talk about, this always has this, right? It has a variance of how compatible is it and how accessible is it. So compatible, you think about it, generally it'll be compatible. So imagine, let's talk about the freaking, what's that app? The Adobe, Adobe, the one that doesn't work on my phone? Yeah, so Adobe Rush, right? So it doesn't work on my phone, but it works on yours and it works on other people's phones. Now that's a compatibility issue. So is it unjust that it doesn't work on mine? Some people, you don't think about it that way. You go, okay, well, stuff you. Go and get a better phone. Or go and get an older phone that makes it work. Fine. So that's compatibility. But then there's accessibility issues. So accessibility is, can a screen reader use this? Or can the application or the software or the page be read to a user who is disabled or who's blind or who, for whatever purpose, right? So that's an accessibility issue. And in many cases, there's some guidelines that you have to meet with federal government websites, applications, same thing with state level, sometimes some of the private entities as well. And you got to meet it for that particular case. But not everything is fixed. There are some issues in most places where, if you're blind, like, you're stuffed. You ain't going to be using this, or it's going to be all jumbled, or it's not going to be good for you. But it takes an inordinate amount of time to fix that for just those amount of people, than just kind of going off and building something else that's really wonderful for everybody else. So then the level there is, you have to make a decision and going, okay, well, I'm going to be unjust to these people to provide the greatest amount of benefit. And then you get stuck into, because in a business sense, it becomes a little bit more rational, hyper rational. And the whole question of is its value, or value being, return on investment, customer net scores, customers being happy. And you're always going to be getting the better score by servicing the greater population is going to be happy, as opposed to the minor few who are going to get pain because of it.
Yeah. So I think we're sort of agree on the point, like, it depends what metric you're using in terms of not even just utilitarian, because I think the utilitarian view is basically everywhere. It's just, even in the emotional sense, it's, what is going to bring me the greater emotion and what's going to take away emotion. So there's always, judging and mathematics being done in your own head, even if it might not feel like it, but it's just based on what it's actually about. The thing about the Omelas story is that it's on well-being, and well-being is usually one of those ones which is, most people would agree, right up there in terms of, if you had to base, what's a well-lived life, how can you say someone's had, what's good and what's bad in terms of human life? Yep. Well-being's right up there. It's not how many years you've lived particular, although that is a bit. It's not how much money you accrued, because then all the billionaires would be the most happiest. They're the ones that we should do. But having money is good as well. So it's a bunch of things, and well-being's right up there. So we'll get to the question one. Would you walk away? Would you, if you were born into this society, let's not say born into this society. Say you came across it right now. You flew to Mars, and they've Elon Musk got it sorted. There's the Mars colony, and they have the Omelas society there.
Yep.
And you fly in, and the first thing they do is they take you, they show you that, and then you get to experience, the joys and whatnot. Are you staying? Are you hanging around?
That's an interesting question.
So I'll go for me. This is one of those ones where I like to think I would do the right thing, but I would say my track record of decisions is, I usually find the moral thing more in hindsight. So it takes me one or two times of doing something wrong. It doesn't have to be super bad. It's like, it's not like I need to kill someone and then realize, killing's bad.
Damn.
But I would say I don't think I have the perfect record of being great at making the correct moral decision right away. So I would say maybe I'd like to think I'm one of those ones who walk away, but they'd probably be a bit older when they do it. Yeah,
I agree. I think if I mulling it over, I'd have to be the one where I would remain leaving it as is until the guilt grew to a point, and probably that would take me being mature and older to go.
And thinking about it, actually spending some time.
I've got to, this is now like at a point where I need to move away. In answering that question, I don't know whether it enhances, because the trouble with that answer is you gotta assume, are we humans, like the normal humans, or is it like this made up like group or society? And I wanted to actually bring this up, and it is deeply philosophical, and there's no way we're going to get this right, but it's just, I thought I had in my mind, right? So existence. So there is no existence without suffering. That's kind of my view. That seems to me like very evident.
Yeah.
And whether you look at it like how Jordan Peterson explains it, or maybe in Buddhism, right? It's just got to be there. But also in Buddhism, where they look at, enlightenment. So when you reach enlightenment, you basically surpassed above all issues, all suffering, all mere mortal thoughts that are weighing you down. No, that's all gone beyond that. You've reached enlightenment. But I think to reach that point means to almost by definition say that there is no existence then. Like that's it. You've surpassed that. Maybe you're something else, let's just say, but you're not existing as a human, because as a human you need to have suffering, or either like forced suffering, external suffering, or you will just create suffering yourself. And so when I think about the story, I go, even in a truly joyous world where everything is perfect, like absolutely everything is perfect, like I could say personally, I would create suffering somehow in some way. Whether
like
that
in
would
a self-destructive way?
not in a self-destructive way, as a human, you will create suffering. And that might be, let's just say everything's joyous and perfect. You might go, oh, but I wish I had this. Or actually, no, I wish it was a bit harder. Or, oh, I want to train harder and make it feel harder. Like to some extent, you would introduce suffering into your already perfect life. Because I'm just trying to think of like, even in today's world, you imagine just a normal day, we introduce suffering in some way, shape or form into our world, or it's introduced.
Yeah.
So
would that change? So I was really trying to put myself in this situation. So I was sort of thinking, take the top 20, 30 peak experiences of my life and then, merge them into one, and then try and imagine what it would be like to be in that state all the time. And I have a feeling I'd be able to live in that without needing more. Like I've definitely had times where I've been super happy. I've definitely had times where, shit's going wrong, but I've found a way to sort of find contentedness within that. And having all of those sort of merged together, I could sort of see myself in a way where it's just, I'm just living and like all is good. Like I don't need more.
And if that's the case, I struggle to imagine anybody who would walk away from Omelas.
Yeah.
Because as an individual, as a human, like that overwhelming amount of joy would, like I would even say at that point, it could be 100 humans. In fact, if it was 100 people in this thing, not just one, but 100, it probably makes it even easier, because you're like, oh, well, it's a group of people. Like it's interesting when you say one, because it's like in that example of when people donate to a charity donation, when you like focus on one as opposed to like, hey, there's 1 million people, with tuberculosis, but you say, like, Sarah's got tuberculosis, please give money. Yeah. People will give more money to that for that particular one than 1 million people. Yeah. That's almost that same thing, that if it was a group, it'd be even easier. But yeah, I just struggle to imagine anybody who would not stay because...
And just look at, drug addicts, for example. You take the first time you take heroin, that is probably the best thing that you could do with your life for those 20 minutes, however long a heroin dose lasts for, because, that's probably the most joy, the most dopamine, the most whatever it is you'll be able to experience. So, probably in terms of like ethically speaking, it's probably the best thing you can do if you know you're going to die in 20 minutes. The best thing you could probably do in the world is actually shoot up heroin, like, because you're just introducing more well-being into the world. I reckon you could make a
good argument for that. Yeah. But look, I'm stating it straight out. Like every mere mortal would remain in that. And if you were to walk away, like I know when you look at the story, people can think, yeah, maybe I'd do it. Like, that's the just thing. But I think the only people in real life that would walk away from that, you'd have to be enlightened. Like you would have to be at such a point surpassing normal human emotions, feelings, and joy that you step beyond like you as a human and caring for like everything justly and equally. Until you do that, I wouldn't imagine anybody to walk away.
Yeah, well, that's sort of like, it's almost analogous to the Buddha. He reached enlightenment, but he came back from it to teach, to help others reach it. That's... So basically everyone in that situation who walks away is the sort of Buddha level of
basically it would have to be
ethics and whatnot.
And if we go by Buddhism, it's like, I don't know, there's been like 8 or 9 Buddhas or whatever it is. So,
Yeah. The track record's not that great.
Not that great. And what, I can't remember what the name of that other one is, but it's people who can become a Buddha, but don't for the sake of humanity or the community. So they just stop at that point and just like help out. Like,
I can't remember what they are either. So those who walk away, I have a feeling I'm coming to the conclusion philosophy is a real individual pursuit. I don't think you can have a one size philosophy for everyone, much like the holy grail of of science would be to, find the like what it is that makes the universe tick, like explain everything that happens. I don't think that's possible in a philosophical way either. I think it needs to be individuals coming into their own conclusions and making it from there. And some are going to do it right, some are going to do it wrong, and then there's going to be all in between.
All in betweens, yeah.
So it's also like how to choose which injustice to fight for as an individual, because this situation's real easy because there's just one. But what if there's 6 different ones?
Well, imagine just the real world, like the real world where there's millions of injustice happening every day. Whether you can think about it from that we're donating more money to climate change than tuberculosis. And so we could be saving millions of kids every single year. We choose not to, so we can try and save the planet. And, that's at least tactical, short term. That means we're choosing to kill more people in the short term. So like, is that injustice? Sure. Obviously, if you look at it from their point of view, goddamn, I'm sure they don't want to die.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's such a minefield. All of this is, that it's really hard to get your head around of what it is. You look at like the Soviet style where it's not even hidden injustices. So this is where it gets real funny, funny in a truly horrific sort of way. So the show trials of the Soviet Union. So this is when the high top leaders just underneath Stalin getting purged, and they then have to denounce basically themselves and how they were a wrecker. They were trying to dismantle the Soviet system. They were fighting against everything. They were secretly all of these things, and everyone knows it's bullshit. Everyone knows that this is a true injustice. Like, this guy was a hardworking dude. He put his worked his way up to the top. Maybe there's probably some points to be argued that if you got to the top of that system, you're probably a kind of bad person. Although
already, maybe.
There's some ways of saying that, but you could also just be like, man, he was in this position, then all was taken away from him, and then he's, it's just so in your face. The injustice is so ripe and in your face, and that's what leads to all the rioting, the bad things, the revolutions, I guess. Some revolutions are good, but a lot of the times they make things worse, for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. But then injustice can also be almost as small as John Peterson's latest book I'm reading, The Next 12 Rules, has a little injustice of it on the viewpoint of flipboards. So he was explaining about this little story of this lady that came to see him. And I don't know if you know the story, but basically she was getting really, really upset because at her work, they are trying to change the word of flipboards. They don't want to use flipboards anymore.
Oh, yeah, actually,
yeah. So, and in short, it's because flip could be used as, a derogatory term for Filipinos, but, but there's no Filipino people who work there. There's no Filipino people who are objecting to it, but they're holding all these meetings and they're holding all these discussions being like, we shouldn't change to flipboard. They ended up changing to like easel board or something like that, even though it's not an easel. And, she feels really like she doesn't want to partake into it because she comes from an Eastern Bloc country where she's grown up in a communist society where they prevent people from saying words and saying things. And she's like, well, this is not just. Like, we should have the freedom to be able to communicate and talk in the ways that we want. Just because it's a blackboard doesn't mean that we shouldn't call it a blackboard. Like, all of a sudden now things are black. We can't call them black like that. That feels unjust to some people. But then on the opposite side, someone might have a real beef with using the words flipboard and blackboard. And so, kind of like you're saying, the philosophies, like, you can't say that one's right and the other one's wrong. Because you can have one person's view of philosophical view of that is right, on the justness of it is right, and the other person might view it as right. Like, unless it's a universal dictator of what's right and what's wrong, then both of them can have their own view of it.
Yeah, well, I think the real moral from that story is choosing one thing to be the supreme value above all else. We're going to eliminate injustice in the world. You end up creating your own because you go into this weird circle where you're doing better, you're helping people, and then it's
until you don't.
I need to start attacking other people to help these people, and then you get to the point where it's
you've now created injustice to more people.
Now you're fighting. You're the guy who's doing like the anti-racism. It's impossible to be racist against white people sort of thing. It's like,
well, it's the same.
Well, shit.
It's the same discussion as like if you would say, all right, everybody gets everything that they want. And if you do that, there's still going to be lots of injustice everywhere because, some people are going to want the opposite of some other people. So
exactly.
You can't win there.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yep.
Any more notes?
No, that's pretty much it for me.
Right, so let's do the mere mortal moment. So mine is the negative wins again. So this is a little interesting thing I found, which is there's some philosophers out there, and I think it was saying that the predominant philosophy is that injustice is a quality of its own. So you could look at it as a sliding scale of justice is on this side, injustice is over here, and it's sort of tipping between the two, and both of those are qualities that we feel fully. So I can go into one situation, feel complete injustice, and then I can go into another and feel justice. Whereas most philosophers actually say no, that injustice is like the main quality, and justice is just getting away from that. It's a moving, like it's a just like a step change difference from it. It's getting into the terms of like qualia. And this is what it's like to feel something, and then the other is not the opposite of it. It's just different from it. It's
tangential to it.
For me, it was just like, the negative wins again. We feel negative emotions more strongly. We feel loss more strongly.
Definitely.
We feel injustice more strongly than justice.
Mine was, I was trying to think of, okay, how can I because the ones who walk away with Omelas is a little bit removed from normal human thoughts and maybe human society in general, just the way that the story is presented. I'm like, do we do that in any other places that I could compare it to? So the caterpillar does all the work, but the butterfly gets all the publicity. Because, if you think about it from that perspective, you go, it's the butterfly, but no one cares about the caterpillar. What injustice exists to the fucking caterpillar? Yeah. It's the caterpillar does all the work, becomes the cocoon, and then turns into a butterfly. Like, it's doing all the work. The butterfly is just it. So it's an interesting thing where we've applied an injustice to an object, a creature who doesn't even care about justice or injustice. But we've just implemented that to it being like, oh, well, it's a butterfly. But like, nobody congratulates the caterpillar for going into a cocoon and doing all the work. So equally, I think there'll be a lot of those probably things within human society that also happens where we praise the butterfly aspect of it and we just completely ignore the caterpillar side of things. Kind of equally in, not all the time, but when people become really successful in whatever form, whether it's sporting, whether it's business, whatever, you'll look at it as a butterfly, like, oh, well done. Like, that's just, and maybe it's an injustice to not recognize everything else that's happened in the past, or the issues or the difficulties, etc. So
or even the opposite of huge companies. They're treated as the bad guys, like big bad Microsoft. They've taken stealing all the world's money and misappropriating it, giving it to only a couple of people. And it's like, have you used bloody Excel? Do you know how good that piece of software is? That is amazing.
Yeah.
I was just going to say with the butterflies, they just get blamed for giving Buddhist monks erections. That's all.
No, that's the caterpillars.
Yeah,
the caterpillars.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Goddamn caterpillars. I was channeling something about that caterpillar giving an erection. They were like, wow, I can't believe it. And they messaged me later being like, so it bit me and I got an erection. I'm kidding. They did not do that. But if you at home, mere mortals, but if you mere mortals want to try that, let me know. I want to hear if someone at the mere mortals crew does it.
That's it. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this far. If you've gotten this far on either the audio or the video versions, much appreciated.
Much appreciated.
There is an injustice going on in the world at the moment, and it's that the Mere Mortals are not the number one podcast in the world, in the globally, universe right now. That is. So
I think currently it's Joe Rogan, followed closely by who knows, someone else. Then there's a couple of podcasts, then us, then a couple of other podcasts. So if you could just go up a little bit on that scale. A little sneaking up that scale will be fine.
I would say there would be more justice in the world.
There would be more justice.
We rose up. So how can they do that one? How can they
help us out? Easy. So first of all, if you're listening on the audio, and if you're not already following along after like 400 episodes, I'd probably say follow along. Like, it's going to make it easier for you.
Hit the follow or subscribe button.
Correct. It is. Yeah, whatever it is. I know that iTunes is also changing whatever they're calculating. Did you see that all this stuff? I was like, man, I'm not even going to look at this. If you can leave a review, a comment if you're on the YouTube, that would be also appreciated. Of course, it also helps out. But definitely telling one person, tell another human, ask them, would you walk away from the mere mortals? And the answer is no.
No.
The answer is goddamn
Would
no.
you walk away from the
So that's it, mere mortals. One out.
Going out.
Ayy.
Have some.